Hello, welcome to the channel. So I have just about 150 hours now on the Husqvarna mower here behind me, so it's time to perform some maintenance. Now I have the maintenance checklist right out of the manual, and Husqvarna doesn't provide a 150-hour maintenance per se, but they do provide a checklist to complete every 25 hours and another one to complete every 50 hours. So I'll be combining those two checklists today. Now I have the GTH 52 XLS. It's a garden tractor model. So if you have a lawn tractor or another Husqvarna garden tractor model, you might want to refer to your maintenance schedule because it might vary a little bit from what I'm going to be doing today. So with that said, let me go ahead and pull the mower into the shop and we'll get started. Okay, so I'm going to be starting with the air filter today, which is just underneath this cover here. Now you can probably tell I've been mowing in some really dusty conditions and this filter needs to be cleaned. Now originally the mower came with a filter that would look something like this. This is just a paper element filter. And you can clean these once or twice, but they're not really designed to be a permanent solution. And they cost, $12 or $15 every time. So I've replaced my paper filter element with a K&N filter. This is designed to be a permanent filter. So you just need to clean it, let it dry, and then oil it and put it back on. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do now. Now this is a pre-filter that I have around the filter element, and you can see it's doing its job and catching a lot of dirt. K&N provides this special cleaner for use with their filter elements. Basically this is just a degreaser. So I'm going to go ahead and spray down the filter element really good, and I guess I'll go ahead and spray down the pre-filter as well. As you can see, it's nice and dirty. And once I let the cleaner soak in, I'll go ahead and rinse them out with some low pressure water. Now after the filter and pre-filter are nice and clean, they'll have to be dried. And after they dry, then I'll go ahead and spray the pre-filter element with some of this special K&N oil. This oil helps to kind of grab dirt as it goes through the cotton gauze. Now once that's done, I can go ahead and reinstall it into the mower. Okay, so I have my filter all nice and clean now, and the pre-filter is clean as well, but they are still wet. Of course, I could set them aside and let them dry overnight, but I don't want to wait that long. So I have a boot dryer here, and this is going to significantly reduce the amount of time it takes to dry my filter element. Okay, so next I'm going to be checking the battery. Now the battery's nice and clean. I don't have any corrosion or anything like that. But I was noticing the last couple of times I tried to crank the tractor, it was cranking really slowly, and I believe the battery has gone flat. Now there's a little indicator here that shows me my charge level. There's a green, yellow, and red LED, and it's been flashing red. This is a nice little feature of this tractor. So that gives me another indicator that the battery has a problem. So let's go ahead and measure the voltage and see what we get. It's about 12.1 volts. And I have a little lookup table here that shows me the capacity relative to voltage. And at 12.1 volts, I'm about 50% capacity. And it seems that that's just barely enough to start the tractor. Now this battery is only about 3 years old, or a little over 3 years old, so I don't want to replace it if I don't have to. So I went ahead and took off the top covers here, and I did notice that it's a little bit low on water. Now I'm not too surprised because we've been having some really hot weather here lately, and I've never topped this off before. So before replacing this battery, I'm going to go ahead and top it off. I have some distilled water here. And after I top it off, I'll go ahead and charge it, and we'll go from there, and hopefully I'll be able to recover the battery without having to replace it. Okay, so yesterday I topped off the battery with fresh water and I fully charged the battery. And once the battery was charged, I disconnected the charger and let the battery just sit here overnight. The idea is I wanted to make sure that the battery was capable of holding a charge overnight, and it's been more than 24 hours since it was charged. So let's check the voltage again and see what we get now. So I'm measuring 12.6 volts. Which is very close to 100% capacity. It's around 97% capacity, something like that. So I think I've recovered this battery here just by filling it up with water and recharging it. I don't think I'm going to need to replace this battery immediately. Next, I just need to make sure it's going to crank the engine without that sort of slow rotation that I was seeing before. Okay, so I'm checking the battery post and terminals for any signs of corrosion, and everything looks good here. Now, there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, whenever I buy a new battery, I always put a bead of silicone around both of the battery posts. I've learned over the years that that area is a key area where battery gases can escape, which then causes corrosion on the posts or the terminals, and that helps to prevent that problem. The second thing I do is I use this bulb grease, also called dielectric or silicone grease, on the terminals, and that's a secondary level of protection. Now, when I perform an oil change, I always like to make sure that the engine oil level is right at the full mark on the dipstick. That way it's easy to tell how much oil the engine is consuming over time. And before I change the oil, I always like to do a check and verify the level. Now in this case, the engine oil is just below that full mark, which tells me that the engine hasn't been burning any noticeable amount of oil. And the oil is also really clean, so the oil is not contaminated. So those are good signs. And I also like to check underneath the oil cap here. Now there's a little O-ring, and I'm just checking to make sure it's in good shape, and it looks great. You definitely want to check that because that little O-ring is really the only thing that's protecting your engine from getting dust inside of this filler here. So everything looks okay there. I'm going to go ahead and start up the engine, let it run for 5 or 6 minutes, and shut it off, and then I'll go ahead and start the oil change. Now, all the Husqvarna tractors I've ever seen have these little side panels here. Now originally it would have had a little thumb rivet like this here, a little plastic pop rivet to hold it into the frame, but I removed mine when I bought the tractor, and I haven't seen any negative issues with that. This has never gotten loose or fallen off, and it makes it a lot easier to take off for maintenance. So I just pull that straight up and out, and now I have lots of easy access to the side of the engine there. Okay, so here on the right side of the engine, this is your drain port here, this little yellow plastic piece. Now you see I have a wire here in the way. I'm going to go ahead and just pull that up and kind of tuck it out of the way there. And basically take this cap off. The oil is going to drain out of here. Now the mower actually came with this little plastic hose, and that just fits along there. And the oil will come right out of here and drain through the hose. Now I don't have a lot of room here. I have a 52-inch mower deck. It's pretty large, and so it's too crowded in here to get a drain pan. So what I've done, I've put a couple of 2x4s just to raise up the area, and I'm going to drain it directly into a milk carton here. Okay, so I put a couple of paper towels under here to hopefully not make such a mess. Now to get the oil to start flowing, you just push this little yellow plastic piece in slightly and turn it to the left. And then you just pull it straight out. And to help facilitate the oil draining, you want to go ahead and remove the dipstick. Now while the oil's draining, I've gone ahead and placed a jack here on the opposite side of the mower just to tilt this side up a little bit. You don't actually have to do that, but it does help to get more of the engine oil out on the other side. Okay, so it looks like my oil flow has stopped now. So I'll go ahead and take off the hose, and I'll push this guy back in and just turn it back to the right. And then put the cap back on. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that the area is nice and clean. And I'll go ahead and put this cable back in. Okay, so here I am on the left side of the engine. This is where the oil filter is. And I made sort of a funnel here. I've been using this for years. I cut it out of a 1-quart oil bottle, as you can see. I'm just going to tuck that underneath because otherwise it'll make a big mess taking off the filter. Now, I guess if you didn't have something like this, you could just use any kind of piece of plastic or maybe even a piece of cardboard. And I just am using the same milk jug here that I used to drain the oil on the other side. And hopefully the oil will just come right out of the underside of the filter and down into here. Now this is a 75.6 millimeter oil socket here. It actually works for both my Jeeps and the Husqvarna tractor. So go ahead and slip this on and get this filter off. There we go. I'll go ahead and clean up the area where the new filter is going to sit onto the engine block there. Okay, I have my new oil filter here. It's a Stens filter. I've gone ahead and filled it up. I'm using this full synthetic 5W30. This is just a Walmart brand. And I put a bead of oil, new oil, on the O-ring there to help it seat. So that'll help prevent it from leaking and seal a little bit better. So go ahead and fit this guy on. Now once it seats, you only want to give it another half turn or so. You just want to be finger tight. You don't want to over torque it. Now to fill up the engine oil, you just need to remove the dipstick, replace it with a funnel, and pour it in there. Now, the old Briggs Stratton engines used to call for single weight SAE 30 motor oil, but today's multi-weight oils are a lot better than that single weight oil in my opinion, and SAE 30 is getting more difficult to find. When I bought this tractor, I was reading through some Briggs Stratton material, and it stated that if you're using full synthetic oil, like I have here, you can use a 5W30 in every Briggs & Stratton engine made up to that point. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going to go ahead and top off the engine. It's going to hold about 1.9 to 2 quarts. Okay, so the oil level is about halfway between the low and the full mark. So what I'll do now, I'll go ahead and I'll crank up the engine and let the oil circulate through the engine for a bit. And I'll check for leaks while the engine is running as well. Then I'll shut the engine off, let the oil drain back down. I'll let it sit for a little while, and then I'll check the oil level again. And if I need to add any oil, I'll just add a little bit at a time until the oil level is right up to the full mark on the dipstick. Okay, so next I'll be replacing the fuel filter, which is on the left side of the engine. And you want to take note of the flow. There's an arrow here on this new one that shows me that the fuel will be flowing from the back of the tractor where the gas tank is to the engine. And I have these little plastic covers I put on these vice grips to help to protect the rubber a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp it off to help reduce the amount of fuel that comes out of the hose. And I'm only a couple of steps away from a fire extinguisher if things were to go bad. And I've put the mower outside to prevent any fumes getting into the shop. I'm just going to loosen up the clamp here and get it off to the side. Okay, should be able just to pull it off now. There we go. And the new one will just go right in this place. A little easier putting the new one on than taking the old one off, I guess. And get this clamp back on. There we go. Okay, so I think we're good there. Go ahead and start her up and make sure it's working. Check for leaks. Here's the old filter, and hopefully you can see there's quite a bit of debris caught up in that filter. So this was definitely a good time to replace this little fuel filter here. Okay, so I have the mower up on jack stands to gain more clearance, because the next thing I'm going to be doing is replacing the mower blades. Now, usually what I do is when I buy new blades, I'll sharpen them at the 25-hour mark, and usually by 50 hours they're beat up enough to where I just go ahead and replace them. Of course, I have a lot of gravel and rocks and that, so you may be able to get more hours out of your mower blades. But I'm going to go ahead and replace these, and to do that, I need a 5/8" socket, and I'm going to be using this impact driver. Now, if you don't have an impact driver, you might want to use a breaker bar or maybe a really long wrench, because these nuts here are usually pretty hard to get off. Okay, so this mower deck has 3 blades. I've gone ahead and removed all 3 blades. Here's one of the old ones here, and I'll be replacing them with these brand new ones from Oregon. The part number on this is 95-077. I've been using these for a while. These are good quality blades. They're made in the USA, and they're cheaper than the original Husqvarna ones. Now, before I install the blades, I'm going to be putting a bit of dry lubricant on the bottom of each of these washers, and also on the bottom of each of the spindles in the mower deck there. And for that, I'll be using this. This is Amsoil Heavy Duty Metal Protector. It's a dry lube, and once it dries, it creates sort of a waxy barrier. And that just prevents any kind of corrosion or rust, and make sure that nothing gets seized up under there. Now, I'll also be using this to install the bolts. This is a torque wrench, and I have it set to 50 foot-pounds. Now you want to make sure that your blade is oriented properly, and if you're not sure which way it goes, you might want to take a look at the original orientation before you take off the old blades. Okay, so I put a 2x4 here between the blade and the mower deck, just so the blade can't move around while I torque it down. Okay, one down, just need to finish up the next 2. Okay, so next I need to check if the mower deck is level. Now I like to cut the grass in this setting here. It's actually marked as 2.5 inches, but in reality the mower blades are about 2.25 inches above the ground in this setting. Now that actually works out for me. That's how I like to cut the grass. So I'm not going to adjust the height at all, but I do need to check to see if it's level left and right. And also the front of the deck needs to be about 1/4 inch lower than it is in the rear. Now I have a little hack here. I've made a couple of wood blocks. They're 2.25 inches in height. So that's going to help me level it out from left to right. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I want to make sure that the left side of the deck and the right side of the deck are at the same height. And I'm using this 2.25 inch block here. And as you can see, I have a little bit of a gap between the top of the block and the bottom of the blade. Now I can't show you the other side because I don't have a cutout like I have here. But on the other side is the opposite situation. So the block is actually sitting a little bit higher than the blade. So that tells me that my mower deck is leaning a little bit to the left-hand side. So I just need to drop this side of the deck a little bit until it hits the top of this block. And then I'll go ahead and check the other side, and it should be pretty level at that point. Now I've already checked the front. The front seems to be good, but I'll go ahead and check it again once I drop this side of the deck just to make sure. Okay, so just in front of the rear wheel is the adjustment for this side of the deck. Now there's an identical one on the opposite side as well, and this requires a wrench that's 3/4 of an inch. Now if I loosen this nut here, it's going to drop the deck. If I tighten the nut, it's going to raise the deck. And one full turn on this nut equates to about 1/8 of an inch on the deck height. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen this nut here and try to drop this side of the deck. Okay, so I got this side of the deck dropped down a little bit, and that actually leveled out the other side of the deck as well. So as you can see, I no longer have that gap between the block and this blade here. And I just checked on the other side of the deck, and it's perfect as well. So the deck is now level from left to right. I just need to double check that the front is just slightly lower than the rear. Okay, so to adjust the front side of the mower deck, the adjustment is right under here. So here I have an 11/16 inch jam nut. That jam nut needs to be loosened, and just behind it is a 3/4 of an inch adjustment nut. So moving that adjustment nut left and right will raise or lower the front of the deck. Now I actually don't need to adjust the front. I just measured, and it's about 1/4 of an inch lower in the front than it is in the rear. So my deck adjustments are done here, and it's time to move on to the next item. Okay, so next up I'll be performing the chassis lube. Now I just have a standard grease gun here with general purpose grease inside. I do have a nice little fitting here on the end though. This is made by Lock and Lube, and it just makes attachment to the grease fittings on the tractor a lot easier, and it saves some time. So let me go ahead and get started. Okay, so we'll start here on the front of the tractor. I have the front left tire turned out so you can see the fittings. There's one here on the spindle, and there's one here on the inside of the wheel. So before I add any grease, I'm going to go ahead and clean these grease zerks off really good. Get all the dirt off of the outside. Okay, so just need to attach this little guy here and give it a few squirts. And you can see grease is already coming out there at the bottom. So that one's done, and go ahead and get the wheel bearing next. Okay, so we're good there. And we're going to go ahead and clean that grease off and move to the next side. Okay, so there are 3 fittings on the mower deck. There's one here on the left side, right in there. Then in the center, there's one right there on the top of that pulley. And let's go over to the right side. And there's the third one right down in there. Okay, so in order to get grease into the fitting, which is in the middle of the mower deck on top of the pulley, I went ahead and put the mower deck all the way down on the floor. Then I lifted the front end of the tractor up just a few inches just to increase my clearance. So now I'm able to get this fitting in there and go ahead and get some grease in as well. Okay, so just beneath here is the steering gear and the steering plate. It has a bit of dirt and grime on it, so I need to clean it off and then lubricate it. So to clean it, I'm going to be using this brake parts cleaner. And then to lubricate it, you can just use general purpose grease, but I'm going to use this heavy duty metal protector again because this stuff doesn't come off quite as easily, and it also doesn't attract dirt as much. So let me get the camera in there and show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here is the steering plate and the steering gear. So these need to be cleaned off and lubricated, and I put some paper towels down on top of the belts and pulleys just so I don't get any contamination on the pulleys there. Okay, so the brake cleaner is dry now, so I'm going to go ahead and add some lubricant. Okay, so now I'm just going to move the steering wheel left to right just to get the lubricant worked in really well. I'm going to go ahead and make sure this plate is lubricated really well. And there's this little steering joint here. And there's one on the other side as well. Okay, so behind the engine are a few things which I think should be lubricated, which actually aren't listed on the lubrication chart. So on the opposite side there is the transmission speed linkage, and straight down here there's the brake linkage. And then on the bottom side of the steering shaft there's a little bushing. It's a little hard to see there, but I've gone ahead and lubricated those things with that metal protectant. And then up here is the throttle mechanism and cable. So I went ahead and lubricated that with some silicone spray. Okay, so on top of the engine here is the engine air screen. Now it needs to be cleaned as part of the routine maintenance, but as you can tell, mine's pretty clean already. Sometimes it does get grass clippings and that down in here, and I can usually pull those out. Or you can also spray it out with some compressed air. And if you get anything underneath the screen that needs to be removed, for example, I recently had a mouse that was building a nest down in here. There's these four little bolts here. These are 5/16 inch. You can just take those off and this screen comes right off and you can get down in there to clean it out. Okay, so I'm on the back side of the tractor to check for the transaxle cooling. So there's a little white plastic fan which sits on top of the transaxle, which helps to cool it. And you can get a peek of it just through these little holes there. And what I'm checking for is any broken blades or any debris or any big chips that could cause concern. Mine actually looks pretty good. I don't have any problems down there. So everything checks out. Now, if you did have a problem, if you had some debris that needed to be removed, you may be able to reach it with the mower deck all the way down from the opposite side, but it'd be pretty hard to reach in. So the other way to do it is to go ahead and fully remove the mower deck and get up underneath the tractor, and then you can reach it pretty easily. Okay, so I'm back on the front side of the tractor to check off the very last item on the maintenance list, and that's the muffler. So what I'm looking for here is I want to make sure there's no grass or debris caught underneath the muffler that could get hot and cause a fire. And I don't see anything there. Everything looks nice and clean. I don't see any major rust. There's a little bit of surface rust here and there, but nothing major. There are no holes. And the output here is nice and clean as well. So my muffler looks good. Okay, well that officially concludes the 150-hour maintenance, which consisted of the 25-hour and the 50-hour checklists for this Husqvarna garden tractor. Now, it did take me quite a bit of time to complete, but it also saved me a trip to the dealer and probably quite a bit of money as well. So hopefully this was informative, and thanks for hanging in there, and we'll see you next time.